And right at the get-go, I just want to note that Honorable Judge Stephen Cass, is not able to be with us today. His we had a grandson joined us and a couple days ago. He was down there to enjoy that with his daughter Mackenzie, but unfortunately the grandson is having some medical difficulties, and so he came here and has flown back to be with them, but he'll be joining us via Zoom. He sends his appreciation for us having the event today, wanted us to continue to have this event today, but I just wanted to recognize that, and please keep the family in your prayers. With that, for the camera, my name is Greg Peterson. I am the chairman of the Jamestown Bar Association Memorial Committee, and on that behalf, I am calling this special meeting today of the Jamestown Bar Association to celebrate the life of Willard W. Cass, Jr. And as I mentioned, please turn off your cell phones. A reminder to please sign in. Well, in the order of the day, I am going to read the obituary. I have some correspondence for a few folks who were unable to attend. I will read that. And then I have a video, which was an interview with Judge Cass and a tribute. And then we'll open it up to the audience here and for comments. And then for those on Zoom, we don't have the technical ability for you to discuss by Zoom today in front of this audience, but I would commend that you write whatever you feel like you would like to share, and we'll make sure that is added into the final transcript. And that will, Jerry Leneke has agreed to do the transcript, to come out of retirement to do this transcript for the family, and for that we appreciate. The Honorable Willard W. Bill Cass Jr., 94, loving husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather, died peacefully in his home surrounded by family on Christmas Day 2024. Bill was born on November 3rd, 1930 in Jamestown, New York, the son of the late Florence Venman and Willard W. Cass Sr. Bill passionately loved God, his family, and his country. He is survived by his beloved wife of 72 years, Florence Floss Cass, 3 children, Susan, married to Russell Marks of Charlottesville, Virginia, Laura, married to Kevin McNamara of Cascade, Idaho, and the Honorable Stephen, married to Krista Cass of Frewsburg. They have 6 grandchildren and a great-granddaughter and a sister, Janet Cass, and since this was written, obviously the addition of a great-grandson. Bill graduated from Frewsburg Central School in 1948, after which he earned a degree from Michigan State University in 1952, and a few days later was commissioned as a second lieutenant in the United States Army. Before Bill shipped out to Korea, he got a 3-day pass so he could marry his high school sweetheart, Floss. Bill proudly served in Korea from 1952 to 1954, was promoted to first lieutenant, and after the armistice, developed a strong interest in the courts and legal system. When he returned from the war, Bill decided to use the J.B.A. Bill and pursue a law career, earning his Juris Doctorate from Albany School of Law in 1957. Bill practiced law in Jamestown for 14 years, becoming a town justice in the town of Carroll in 1960, after which he was elected New York State Surrogate Court Judge in 1971, a role which he held for nearly 30 years. When he officially retired in 1999, he continued to be active as a judicial hearing officer and later was reelected as a justice for the town of Carroll, being a public service as a judge for nearly 60 years. A passionate big game hunter, and that is an understatement. Just a quick highlight. Bill hunted in India and legally shot one of the last Bengal tigers in 1970 and killed the 5 most dangerous game in the world in Zambia in 1972. In case you're curious, lion, leopard, elephant, rhinoceros, and Cape buffalo. He loved to tell how he shot the charging lion with his wife close by. In 1981, Bill became the 303rd person in the world to shoot the Grand Slam of sheep. While returning from hunting from the Argalai bighorn sheep in Mongolia, Bill and Floss were detained by the Russians for 2 days, during which time they were surrounded by armed guards who ultimately filled Bill's rifle barrel with glue. If you haven't read the obituary, I highly commend it. I will not read it all now, but it's incredible as to all that happened. We know that Bill was an active and dedicated member of the community throughout his life. A devout Christian, Bill prayed and read his well-worn Bible every morning. In addition, he found time to teach Sunday school for many years, enriching the lives of the participants. Bill held many community positions, including the president of the Jamestown Bar Association, Chautauqua County Magistrates Association, and the New York State Surrogates Association. Bill was a founding member of this Robert H. Jackson Center. You'll learn a little bit more about that later. Following a private ceremony in December, he was buried in the Maple Grove Cemetery, Frewsburg, New York. Correspondence. Dear Greg, please accept this correspondence for the memorial service for Judge Willard Cass, as I am unable to attend the ceremony as I am traveling with my family. I suspect that I am not alone in recognizing that in my career as an attorney, I had more trials scheduled before Judge Willard Cass than any other judge. This is true for me, even though my cases before him only took place during the latest portion of his judicial career, when he served as a judicial hearing officer presiding over family court cases. I say most trials scheduled as opposed to trials conducted, because if you practice before Willard Cass with any frequency, you know of his ability to construct and implement a resolution of the case on the day of the trial. His mastery of settlement negotiations was a product of his immense experience, his grasp of the relevant law, and most significantly, from my perspective, his strong sense of conviction about what was right under the circumstances. In those instances when Judge Cass was required to decide a case, I have always admired the clarity and brevity of the decisions he pronounced. In family court circles, Judge Cass additionally is famous for his own punctuality on the bench and his expectations regarding punctuality of others. I could go on, but suffice it to say that there's so much of Willard Cass, the judge and human being, that I hope to emulate in my own career and life. Truly yours, Peter Johnson. Correspondence. Let me begin by saying how much both Bob and I regret that we can't be with you today for Judge Willard Cass's memorial service and to have this opportunity to honor him. We are in Virginia spending some time with our son and family. Judge Willard was one of the kindest persons I ever knew. I must have had well over 100 trials in front of him. In the early years when I was starting out, he was unfailingly supportive. It was a time when there were hardly any women in the field, and it was not unusual to encounter hostility or some type of discrimination. Judge Willard, on the other hand, encouraged me at all times and clearly had the same expectations for me that he had for everyone else. I can't tell you how much this meant to me and how deeply I appreciated it. I did not work full-time until my children were in school, and one day an emergency came up with one of my clients. I had no choice but to go to the Hotel Jamestown, where Judge Willard had chambers at the time, to get his signature on an order to show cause and bring 2 young toddlers with me. I was grossly embarrassed and keenly aware that he might object. Judge Willard acted like that we were all the most welcome sight he'd ever seen. Maybe it was. He sat down and chatted with my children, and offered them lollipops from the jar on his desk that he kept for adoptions. He appeared genuinely delighted to meet them. I left without any embarrassment and unforgettably grateful. I have remembered that day my entire career and now into retirement. When I served as family court judge, prior to there being a second judge, Judge Willard came over to family court on a regular basis to help us out. He did not work in the best of circumstances and had only tiny office to use, but he was not a person who was hung up on the trappings of his position and did not ask for any special consideration or treatment. I remember that when I was an attorney, one of his favorite things was to schedule the very worst cases on the day after Thanksgiving or Christmas before the courts started regularly closing the court those days. I had the distinction of having some of those trials I was involved in scheduled on those days, but he wasn't upset or rude or pushy at those times. Rather, I'd swear that while he hoped those cases would settle, if they didn't, he would make up his mind to enjoy himself, and he did. Judge Willard was a person of great enthusiasms and interest. He loved having long, extended conversations about all things gardening with Bob. He would recount his latest hunting adventures with gusto. He was so proud of his 3 children and couldn't wait to be a grandparent, and so proud of each of his 6 grandchildren. My respect for Judge Willard Cass is something I will always have. My guess that he's influenced more lives than he ever knew. May his memory be a blessing. The Honorable Judith Clare. With that, we're going to pause and we're going to show 2 things. I'm taking the privilege of this position to show a tribute I did for Judge Cass in 2016, because Judge Cass, probably don't know, we wouldn't have had this place here, the Robert H. Jackson Center, but for Judge Cass. So I'll tell that story.
Were you destined to be a lawyer?
No.
No?
No. I was going to be a coach, and I wanted to play professional baseball. Well, one day, my dad's playing cards with John Yackham, and John says, "What's Bill doing now? He'll be in college. What's he doing?" He said, "He's a good baseball player. He should be playing baseball in college now." And so my dad says, "Well, why don't you talk to him, get him in?" He said, "Well, we got a working agreement. The Tigers got a working agreement with Michigan and with Michigan State. If he wants to go to either one of those schools," he said, "all I got to do is call up the coach and he's in." I didn't know anything about Michigan State, but that's where I decided to go, just because I didn't want to follow my sister. Yeah. So I went to Michigan State to play baseball.
While we're on Michigan State, you actually are part of the history, the lore of Michigan State.
Yeah.
Isn't there a trophy that has somehow you have a part of?
Yes. A good friend of mine, Gene McDermott, he was going to run for president. He said, "Why don't you run for vice president?" I said, "What's a vice president do?" He said he doesn't do anything. I said, "Okay, I'll run." At that time, Michigan and Minnesota had the little brown jug.
Yeah.
And he said, we should have something like that between Michigan State and one of the other universities that they play. I said, yeah, that'd be good. Well, in this bar there was an old brass spittoon. And we thought, that's what we ought to use. We can use the old brass spittoon. So we went to the University of Indiana and talked to some of the students there, and they got it approved by the university, and we got it approved by Michigan State. And so the old brass spittoon now is you can see it on TV every time they play Indiana. A few years ago, I was invited out to see the team play, and Gene McDermott was there. Kirk Cousins was the quarterback for Michigan State, and he's now with Vikings. it was kind of interesting because they took us right down on the field.
Well, being the originator of the old brass spittoon is greater than getting a Heisman Award. This is great, you know?
Yeah.
With more on the old brass spittoon, let's go down to Dion.
Eric, I'm with Gene McDermott and Bill Cass, the two men who purchased that spittoon from an antique store 60 years ago. Gene, did you ever imagine that brass spittoon would still be around for this rivalry?
I was hoping. Of course, I was hoping I'd still be around for it, too.
Oh, we're glad that you are. I know you guys were college roommates, your first game, first time you've seen each other in some 50 years. What does it mean to be here, Bill?
It's just wonderful. I can't believe the number of people here. There were only 17,000 students here when we were here in 1948. And Gene just got out of the Navy. He was in the Navy from 46 to 48, and then he went to Michigan State, and we met as roommates.
Oh, that is wonderful. Does it mean a lot to you to be a part of this history?
Sure, he's part of anything right now. I'm 86.
Well, it's wonderful.
He's 84.
You guys are great, and we're glad that you're here. Thanks for joining us for a bit. Eric?
That is awesome. Those two guys, the inspiration for something that's being played for 61 years later. That's a legacy. The story has it. Gene McDermott, Bill Cass, those two guys, they bought a brass spittoon. One of Michigan's earliest trading posts is actually where it originates from. The brass spittoon that is played for is widely regarded to be nearly 190 years old. It is still kind of in protected custody. It's not on the field yet. But the brass spittoon actually is older than both these two schools, Michigan State and Indiana.
Michigan State was a land-grant college. And land-grant colleges, you have to take ROTC. Then when I graduated in 1952, the Korean War was on. Now I'm over in Korea, and then when the war was over, I got assigned to court-martials. Any officer, if you know something about court-martials. Yeah. So I got assigned to defend a number of cases. I sent home to my father. I said, you got to send me a couple of books. I said, I got to know about, I'm defending these people. I got to learn a little bit about the law. So he sent me a couple of books over there. And, of course, I became infatuated with it. And the next thing you know, I decided when I got out of the service that I was going to go to law school. I'd like to go to Albany Law School because that's where my dad went. That's where my uncle Alan went. I see you have a picture of him. He was the first county attorney here. So they accepted me, and that's how I ended up in law school was because of I had no intention of becoming a lawyer. And I came back and I worked with my dad for one year. Mm-hmm. And then Charlie Goodell was our county Republican chairman. Rockefeller was elected as governor of New York. We had what they call a tax attorney in the county. If you're interested, I will appoint you, but you've got to open an office in Jamestown because you got to be available for the lawyers in the Jamestown area. He appointed me, and then I had to start looking around for an office. And Adolph Johnson, it used to be Jude and Johnson, was the name of the firm. And Jude had died a year or two before, and there was a vacant office at the 400 of the Wellman building. Had a secretary, and he said, we can share the secretary. And, you know, she's really good about this tax work because I was the tax attorney for Chautauqua County before Sam Conti was.
No kidding.
I went in with Adolph Johnson. We were never partners. We just shared the office space and shared the secretary. Time came when the surrogate's office became vacant. I ran for surrogate, and that got supported by all of the parties, and I never had a contest. So
Really?
Yeah. So
Terrific.
So now you know the history of. No, I really wasn't going to be an attorney. I was going to be a coach. He went to school with Robert H. Jackson, and I think his name is mentioned in this book that Eugene Gearhart wrote about Justice Jackson. School in Frewsburg, they had inkwells on each of the desks, all those old desks. And one of the boys bet Bob Jackson that he didn't dare urinate in the inkwell. Well, Robert Jackson wasn't about to be denied. And he decided that he was going to win the bet, and he won the bet. I didn't realize that Justice Jackson wrote the letter of recommendation for my father when he went to Albany Law School. Justice Jackson and my father were very good friends, both coming from Frewsburg, which is a small town, and town of Carroll. And when my father decided, he had gone to the University of Michigan for 2 years, and then he decided to go to law school. But when Stephen was there, he had a job. He was working in the library, and he was looking over old files, and he had access to a lot of files and things. Well, he looked up my father's old records, and he found the letter of recommendation that was in the file that was written by Justice Jackson. Because my father went to Albany Law School, that's where I went. So really, Justice Jackson had a great influence on my life. He had the last murder case in Chautauqua County where the defendant was convicted and executed. He had a chance to get the conviction commuted, the sentence commuted by the governor. So in all those cases, the governor heard every one of those. My dad argued this case before Governor Harriman, and he said, I can remember my dad telling me at the time that he said, you know, Governor Harriman, he hardly heard what I was saying to him when I was making an impassioned plea, and Governor Harriman was thinking about his speech that he had to give that night, and he said, I knew it was in vain, and of course it was. And
You've had a distinguished career here.
not really.
Really? If you reflect back, what's the highlight?
Highlight, I would say. I mean, here I never expected to be a judge, and it was always my ambition. In fact, I really kind of planned it after I got reading about Justice Jackson and in law school and reading all these judicial decisions like Benjamin Cardozo and all those people. I thought, what a wonderful life it is to be a judge, and that's what I want to be. I don't want to be anything else. And so I decided that the way you ought to have some kind of judicial experience, and so I ran as a town justice in the town of Carroll back in 1958, and got elected, and was elected for 3 4-year term for 12 years, and so that gave me some background with some experience, especially with my experience as an attorney, as a tax attorney and appraiser for the county. That gave me the background to run as a surrogate, and so that really probably was a highlight, was being elected as surrogate, and having the support of all of the political parties, which was really very unusual. It doesn't happen today, and it happened. I ran 3 times. I ran 3 times as surrogate. The second and the third times I was also ran it on all of the parties. So it was most fortunate to be there at the right time.
And what a thrill to have your son take
Yeah, well, of course that was a great thrill too, that to have Stephen follow me and wanting to be a lawyer. But he always wanted to be a lawyer. See, where I never had wanted to be a lawyer, I always wanted to be a baseball player or a coach.
Yeah.
Well, ever since he was little, he always wanted to be a lawyer because he saw me and he saw his grandfather, and so he had always wanted to be a lawyer. And of course, my oldest daughter, Susan, she's an attorney also, and wanted to be an attorney. So,
Yeah, it's a terrific legacy, the whole family.
well, thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
Okay,
Sure.
thank you.
It is my honor to honor his honor. For years, I have referred to him as the second greatest judge in the history of Frewsburg, New York. And I'm here to reaffirm that. Fourth annual Stanley Weeks event. This is the largest crowd that's ever gathered here, and it is a real tribute to you, Judge Cass. Little history story. You referenced it, and I thought you were going to just steal my complete thunder, but here it goes. In 2000, January of 2000, I had the opportunity to interview Stanley Weeks about his lifetimes as a Mason, as a lawyer, and his direct connection to Robert Jackson. This was before there was any idea that there would be a Robert Jackson Center. But during the course of the interview, he said, you know, if you ever are considering doing something to honor 33rd degree Robert H. Jackson, maybe you should consider this building. Trust me, that was the furthest thing from my mind. During the course of the year, enter an interview with Carl Kappa and his reference to the fact that his hero growing up here in the south side of Jamestown in the 30s as a good Italian-American was not Joe DiMaggio, who you would bet the ranch on, but Robert Jackson. Followed up by a conversation with Betty LeNay, who felt strongly that Robert Jackson was somebody who could and should be honored. Now, all of this was just sort of percolating. Then we got a meeting together with Betty LeNay, Carl Kappa, J.B.A. Foundation folks, and talked a little bit further. I said, hey, what a great idea. Then Stanley Weeks reminded me, hey, Greg, remember when he suggested the Scottish Rite Consistory? And there was an offer on the building, for those who might remember. And Betty LeNay heard about that. And Betty LeNay did what most everybody should do at a moment like this of crisis. She called her good friend, close friend, Judge Willard Cass. And I don't know exactly what happened, but somehow there was, the best I could term it, a Masonic injunction. Something happened. And an opportunity presented itself where we had a chance to propose an idea to you folks here at the Scottish Rite Consistory. And I know now, having read the minutes of the meeting, which I received, what an how instrumental you were, Judge Cass, internally in working with those that were mentioned by Michael, working with Michael and with Carlton Winchester and Bob Crandall, and so many others that I'm going to miss if I go down that road, to advance the idea of this building. This building, which was near and dear to Robert Jackson, near and dear to the Masonic Order, the Scottish Rite Consistory, would continue that legacy of honoring such a 33rd degree in Robert Jackson. I could go on, and the rest is history, but I came across the speech that was given by Stan Weeks here at the Jamestown Bar Association. We honored him in 2003, and he paused to reflect on a phone call he received while the deliberations were going on with this building from Judge Willard Cass while he was in South Africa. He's in South Africa, and you, Judge Cass, took the time, the energy, the effort. I don't know whether you called him collect or not, but nevertheless, you did so. And he was so thrilled about what was going on, but knew that if it had received the affirmation from you, Judge Cass, if it had received the reaffirmation of so many things that happened, that this was a good thing to do. And it happened. And we're thrilled. On behalf of the Robert Jackson Center, we're thrilled on many fronts with the facility that you folks made available to us, that which has happened thereafter, and that which has happened, the legacy you gave us in the form of Judge Cass, as we became a board member here for the last 15 years. We're celebrating our 15th anniversary, much because of the leadership of Carl, Betty, and Willard Cass. He's been a steadfast board member who's represented your best interest of the Masonic Order, the community, and the legacy of a 33rd degree Mason. I could go on, but in the best interest of time, and the mind can absorb only what the rear can endure, so I will kind of draw a closure. It cannot go without saying that this, behind every great man, is an exceptional woman, and to Floss Cass, who not only made him the man that he is, but also really made this night possible. But for Floss's encouragement and the fact that dinner would stop and not be available for the next month if he didn't show up tonight, here he is. So with that, I want to pause, and we have something we're going to give to Judge Cass. I'm from the Robert Jackson Center, which we give very rarely. In fact, usually you've got to be a Chief Justice to get one of these things, Rehnquist, Roberts, and others. But we have a signed lithograph from Laura Bell Colburn of that other judge from Frewsburg that we'd love to present to you at this time. So, Judge, if you could come forward.
Greg Peterson was very instrumental in getting the Jackson Center started with some other individuals. And I was just happened to be at the right place at the right time to be able to help him out at that time with the other Masons that were here and that were instrumental in making sure that this building went to the Jackson Center.
I haven't worn a tie in so long at such events, but in case you noticed, the tie I wore in 2016 is identical to the tie I'm wearing today. My wife's sitting up there, and she's going to say, I'm really embarrassed. With that, I would like to open it up now for folks who are in the audience who would like to step forward.
At the risk of this becoming the Greg and Cindy Peterson show,
Hey.
I just wanted to be among the first because there were several adjectives left out of his obituary. One was that he was progressive. He was so focused, and he was enlightened. And I had the privilege and honor of being the first confidential law clerk that Judge Cass hired. He hired me between my second and third year of law school. I was an intern, and then the state had funded positions, and I was so happy to get 2 part-time positions consolidated into 1 full-time. I was the confidential law clerk for both Adams and Cass right out of law school, which, not being native from the county, was a remarkable opportunity because I got to learn from both of those remarkable men and meet lawyers from all over the county, and everybody was very kind to the judge's clerk, no matter of gender. But there were no women only one woman practicing at the time. So I think Judge Cass hired me because he had 2 daughters. And it was at a time when people were becoming a little bit more aware of maybe the need for some women in the profession. The second thing I would say about him is, yes, Judge, you were a coach, and I think everybody in this room who encountered him was coached by him. He was gentle, he was a gentleman, he was encouraging, he was a great teacher. I learned so much from my experiences with him. One final note, I was doing legal research for him one time, and I used to do the supplements, in all the books. And I opened this book and I started reading there's a picture of this guy named Robert Jackson, and it mentioned that he was from Jamestown, New York. So I go into the judge and I said, you're kidding me, right? This guy was from Jamestown? How come we don't know about him? And Judge Cass said, that book is wrong. And now this is a New York juror book, And he said, he's not from Jamestown. He was from Frewsburg. I was like, oh, okay, I'm corrected. And he said at that point, we've got to do something for Jackson at some point, and he carried through with that with Greg. He was honorable. He was so focused. He was so encouraging to other lawyers. I saw him whittle settlements out of groups that I didn't think would even speak to each other again. He was a remarkable man, and it was really a joy to have had the opportunity to work with him. Thank you.
In fact, Cindy, this is Judge Steve Cass will appreciate that she was featured in early on by the Dunkirk Observer. As for those who recall, the court reporter is a guy named Jim Fox. Jim Fox wrote about Cindy, and there's a picture of her with the judges looking over her shoulder, and referred to her as the pretty young law clerk for Judge Willard and Cass and Leetown Adams. And that she was married to a young attorney in Jamestown, New York, by the name of Frank Peterson. Should you ever meet Frank, please let me know.
Morning, I'm Lynn Hartley. I worked with Bill Cass from 1967 until he was elected to the circuit court in Chautauqua County. I'd just like to give a few memories that I have had of Bill and reflect on some of the things that I learned from him. I first met Bill in the summer of 1966 when I had completed my second year at Syracuse Law School. My grandfather, who lived in Lakewood and was a good friend of J. Russell Rogerson, who was a long time very, very active and very good attorney in Jamestown. He encouraged me to go see him and see if I could get work with him and get myself established in Jamestown. Well, fortunately, my aunt was married to George Matthews, who those of you who may be old enough to remember the Matthews and Miller men's store, which was the men's store in Jamestown and the county for that matter. They were good friends with Bill and Floss. And George had gotten to know Bill by reason of the fact that he was a town justice for a while in the town of North Harmony. So both being in the Magistrates Association, they become friends. And that's how I came to know Bill, because my aunt and uncle said, you don't want to go practice with that old man. Go see Bill, and we know he's looking for somebody to work with him. So I did, and I worked with Bill that summer. When I came into the office to start work, and as Bill had described in the movie, he shared space with then Adolph Johnson, and the other office in that space had been George Jude's office, and that was it. So Bill saw fit to realize that I needed someplace to sit. So he said, come on, we'll go get you something to work on. And at that time, Sears was right down the street from the Wellman building. So we went down to Sears, and Bill bought me the best $10 desk card table that you could get. And so that was my first lawyer's desk, was that card table that Bill Cass bought and put in the corner of his office in the Wellman building. So for that whole summer and sometime thereafter, that was where I sat, and that's where I learned to listen and observe. And that was my beginning for really learning how to practice law. You learn about the law in law school, but you don't learn how to practice it. And when you have the chance to be with someone like Bill Cass, you certainly want to make every minute count with that. And that was one of the best things that had ever happened to me. Well, I got with Bill, I took the bar exam summer of 1967. That was the year of Expo 67 up in Montreal. I was scheduled to come to work with Bill right after Labor Day. So I'm up at the World's Fair in Montreal, and on the way home, I realized I didn't have enough money to pay the thruway toll to get home. So I rode the Route 20 back from the Syracuse area back to Buffalo. And as soon as I got home, I picked up the phone and called Bill and said, "Bill, can I start Monday? I'm out of money." So he said, "Come on down, we'll get you started." Well, on my way down, I'm driving down Route 20, and I'm just past the Syracuse exit to the thruway, and all of a sudden there's a police car behind me with the lights going, and so I pull over, and they asked me what I was doing. What I told them I was just coming to Jamestown to start practice with Bill Cass. And he said, "Well, you know why we stopped you?" And I said, "No." Well, I had on my car, I had gotten a plate in Syracuse, so it was a 1S plate that was out of Syracuse. They happened to be looking for, apparently it was alleged, I can't remember if it was, I think he was somebody that wanted for a homicide of some sort. So that was my introduction to the state police in Chautauqua County. But so I got to work with Bill for a while, and as was stated, he was the estate tax commissioner. I happened to mention to Bill that one of my professors in college was Professor Murphy, who happened to be on the State Tax Commission. Well, unbeknownst to me, he went and made some phone calls, and the next thing I know, I was designated deputy at no salary, of course. And that was a big point. But I got the opportunity to travel around the county, learn the county, all the back roads in the county, and a lot of the attorneys in the county. And that was very much appreciated and was an excellent experience for me. Shortly after I started doing that, I found out the real reason Bill wanted me to do that. He had scheduled for his first trip to Africa to go big game hunting for elephants. And that was why he had wanted to hire somebody, because he knew he was going to be gone for several weeks, and he needed to have somebody in the office to take care of business. So that was why I really got to practice in Jamestown for Bill Cass. But it was certainly well worth it. It was mentioned Bill running for and being unopposed for the surrogate court position. Well, most people don't remember before that position became available, Judge Palmer, who had been the family court judge, was getting ready to retire. And there's a practice where the county committees of the various political parties would get together and select their designated candidate for the office. So Bill made sure that I went and got on the town committee for the town of Bustye, Republican committee, and we went to the meeting in Mayville, and Bill and John Hollenbeck, who had been the chief clerk of family court under Judge Palmer, were two of the four candidates. One of the other one was the city court judge in Dunkirk, and after the votes were counted, it was too close. Nobody had won outright, but the candidates had agreed that those who didn't get enough votes would drop out and just the top two would go head to head. So they counted the votes, and John Hollenbeck won the vote. And as soon as the vote count was announced, Bill Cass got up, was recognized, and made a motion to make Judge Hollenbeck's nomination to be one unanimous vote to support him for the family court position. And with that act by Bill Cass, that guaranteed him all of the other candidates for the next judicial spot they would stand by and support Bill Cass, and that's how he was unanimously selected as the Republican candidate for Surrogate, and the other political parties all backed him on that. But that was a little story about how he ran his first judicial campaign, and he made so many more friends by backing Judge Hollenbeck after that vote that secured his spot in the judicial history of Chautauqua County. I know Judge Clare mentioned Judge Cass always holding court on Christmas Eve, and I know there are some here that I know had some of those Christmas Eve trials, some of which actually did go to trial. Most of the time, Bill Cass was able to get people to settle them, but every once in a while, they would not settle, and he had no problem in going to trial on Christmas Eve. That happened many times. In working with Bill, I certainly learned that the law was not his first love. As he mentioned, he went to college on, and I believe it was on a athletic scholarship, and he was going to college to become a coach, a physical ed teacher, and it was his experience in the Army after he completed the ROTC program that is when he first learned to really love the law. He absolutely was not interested in the law based on what his father did, but that service in the Army really changed his mind. Fortunate for us, he had that experience and came back to practice in Jamestown. But it was always interesting in the office, especially around World Series times. Again, those of you who remember Sears in the building where the Post-Journal is now. And during World Series times, we always found time to run down to Sears and catch a couple innings of the game that was on before we went back to work, so we could make sure that Bill didn't miss any of the games that were going on. So it was a real pleasure to work with Bill for all those years until he went up on the bench in 1972, and he will certainly be remembered by many, many generations of folks here in Chautauqua County and the legal community. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to follow up on some of the fine words that Cindy spoke, because I had very similar experiences with Willard. There's so much that I could say about Judge Cass, but I will be brief. But I have to tell you that he was an example and an inspiration to me, both as a judge and as a person. And although he was the surrogate judge, he spent a lot of time in family court. And I practiced a lot in family court. And I can remember as a young attorney, I appeared before him, and I thought, wow, what a great judge. And he's just the type of person I would want to aspire to be like. I was there one day on an appearance. I was a young attorney, and we finished the appearance. He said, "Mr. Piazza, will you approach?" "Oh boy, what's up?" I get up there. He leans over. "I hear you just came back from a bear hunt. Did you get one? What did you see?" I said, "You missed. How could you? We're going to have to talk about that later." And I was the most embarrassed I'd ever been before him. I had to tell him I missed a bear. But it was interesting because, the experiences that he had, Africa, India, Mongolia, I used to love to hear about his experiences. But he cared enough to ask me about my experience. And I'm sure he forgot more of the neat things that he did than I'll ever do in my life. But that really, really stood with me, that he wanted to hear about my experience. Then there's another experience I had with him. I was a young attorney and put a divorce stip on the record. And I thought I laid everything out, but no, I didn't. I forgot some things. And he said, "Well, maybe we want to do this as well." And I remembered, yeah, I know we want to do that. I should have put that on there. And he had an opportunity to make me look like a dummy or to teach me. And I walked out of there. He taught me. I never forgot that again. But I always appreciated the fact that he never let on that I forgot something. And I always tried to remember that. And when the attorneys appeared before me, I tried to remember how Judge Cass treated me, and I tried to treat the attorneys that came before me in the same way. But as a person, he was also very inspiring. I used to love to hear his stories about his travels, as I said, to India, to Africa, out west, Alaska. And he was an example to me of how to live life. In fact, I am going to Africa in August, and I can remember talking to him about that, and he lit up, and he gave me a lot of good advice, and I'll always appreciate that. But one of the best things anyone ever said to me in my 10 years as family court judge, it was at the beginning of my term, and we were in a pretrial conference, and the attorneys were a bit difficult. Not that any of you in this room could have ever been that way. And I said, "Maybe we should have this, I've got Christmas Eve open, let's schedule it." And one of the attorneys said, "Just like Willard." And I happened to see him shortly thereafter. He said, "Hey, Willard, someone just told me the best thing I ever heard." "What?" He said, "I was just like you." And he had a big smile. I told him what happened. And I have to say, that's one of the best things anyone's ever said about me. You were just like Willard. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. Greg Edwards, Jamestown, New York. Pleased to have this opportunity. Jeff and I were drawing straws at who had to follow whom, and I lost. So I would have preferred to go first, but thank you all for coming. One of the many gifts that God has given me are friends. And through them, I've been blessed. And my life has been much better as a result. The other judge, Steve Cass, is one of these. And through over 40 plus years of our friendship, I've had the distinct opportunity to know his dad, Judge Cass, in a unique way. I can confirm all of the accolades, Judge Cass, that have been shared already and those that will certainly follow. I distinctly remember going to his chambers and seeing the pictures he had prominently displayed of his lovely wife, Flossie, and of him competing in the Marine Corps Marathon. Much has and will be said about his character, his capacity, his temperament as a lawyer and a judge. Because of my friendship with Steve, however, while I saw much of that, I also saw a different side of Willard. While many of you know of his professional hunting pursuits around the world and the successes and experiences that he had, few know that virtually every Saturday morning and many holidays, Willard would be up at dawn or before and headed out into the field to hunt, trap, scout, or to a stream or a lake to fish. This continued in earnest when Steve, at a very young age, was able to join him. And it occurred even on those Saturdays when Steve had a football game or a baseball game or there was some other family obligation. Added to this, they traveled all over the United States hunting and fishing, as well as a variety of other life experiences. Those of us in a small circle were part of some of these adventures. As my friend Tim Black and Judge Hartley and Judge Piazza and Dr. Kahn and Jerry Leneke, who are all here with us today, will attest, it was at these moments when we saw the judge in his element. Highly competitive, striving to be the first person to catch his limit of fish or fill his tags. But equally important, we saw him deliver his own unique humor, typically at the expense of one of us, but most typically his hunting and fishing partner, Lucien Ledestro. Lucien was my mentor, and many of you as well, someone I admire, and he'd been Willard's lifelong friend since their days together in law school. Willard knew just how to stimulate Lucien with a well-timed comment or a quip while on a stream, or he would regularly share them on our two-way radios while hunting so we could all hear. This would ultimately result in a classic Lucien Ledestro response that we could all enjoy. I'd repeat them, but that would not be appropriate company. I also watched how Steve repaid all these life lessons and opportunities as Willard aged and needed assistance to continue these pursuits. Steve gave a master class to all of us as he generously provided that help and encouragement right up to his dad's last days. Like all of you, my life experiences are richer by knowing Judge Cass both, and I'm thankful for that gift. Thank you.
Just to do a postscript to what Greg Edwards said, I did talk to His Honor Stephen Cass yesterday, and he said, you know, my dad was active and physically active, and I was glad to assist, but he'd actually bagged a deer in November. Think about that, sports fans. That's amazing. Anybody else would like to share? I have Arthur's asked for Mike.
Nationwide march, so I asked to speak here, and I am surprised that so many of the people that knew Judge Willard Cass have the same observation that I have, but with this biggest difference. Most of you have known him when he was a judge, or I knew him first when I was 13 years old, laying in the Jamestown General Hospital in an iron lung with polio, because into that polio ward came 2 visitors every week when they were in high school in Frewsburg, and that was Bill Cass and his sister Nancy. And the reason was because they had developed a friendship with a man named Paul Rosen, who was a polio mate of mine. And for the entire year that I was there, in 48 and 49, they were in there every week. And I used to read about him as an incredible high school athlete. And whenever our schools faced each other, no matter how good we were, and how high the hopes were, Frewsburg always beat us, and always partially or totally because of Bill Cass. Our lives intersected again when I came to Jamestown in 1961. And Bill had already been practicing for a few years, and he had become a recognized expert in an area which I haven't heard about today with the discussions about the tax. But he had developed a tremendous reputation after only 3 or 4 years in defending DWI cases, which at that time were a big thing for beginners. And I don't know how I remember this far back, but there was a town justice in the town of Ellicott who always sat in Celeron by the name of A.E. Harry Johnson. And he was difficult to say the least when you're defending a DWI case, because right from the bench he would always say this or something similar. Why are you pleading not guilty? The police wouldn't have brought him in here if he wasn't guilty. And I don't know why you're doing this. Later, when I had tried a case in Ellicott until 5:45 in the morning, all night long, because I had put in the patent for the breathalyzer, and right in the patent it states that this is sensitive to 34 different hydrocarbons, and it doesn't measure alcohol at all, other than the fact that alcohol has hydrocarbons in it. And we went around with these experts until that time, and I learned from Judge Cass, who was unlike any other competitor your age. The same with Lucian Ledestro. They wanted to help. They wanted to teach. They wanted you to do it better than you did the last time. And Judge Cass gave me a Supreme Court case, and each time I would appear in front of those justices of the peace, I'd always be able to get them, because of what Bill Cass tipped me off. If you say you demand anything in front of A.E. Harry Johnson, he will say, where do you get the idea of demanding? I'm the judge, you're not the judge. You don't demand. And he would not grant a trial or an adjournment. And the Supreme Court case held that was automatic. Back at that time, Roland Fancher and McKinley Phillips were the appeal court in Buffalo, and every one of them got thrown out. And I loved Bill Cass then for this kind of teaching. Then a whole life passes by, and I wind up in a field of antitrust class actions. And believe it or not, nobody in this room knows it, except Stephen probably does, because he was in on it sometimes. Judge Cass, after he retired, always wanted to get a complaint from me, and I remember the one on the price of eggs, which went for 400 million, and I was just told yesterday of somebody complaining about paying $10 a dozen for eggs right today, and it sounds like they need another jolt. But in any event, Bill Cass would have me forward over to him these 70, 80, 90, and more complaints on each of the class actions. He always read them. He always had good ideas. He would call back and discuss. And I just admired him so much. And I don't want to speak longer now because other people have made the same observations I have. Jamestown is lucky. The Jackson Center is more lucky, and all of us in the profession are lucky to have known and practiced in front of Bill Cass and with him as well.
Thank you, Art. We will stand adjourned, and a transcript prepared by one Jared Leneke will be prepared for the benefit of the family. And I must just conclude by saying to His Honor Stephen Cass, everybody here extends our prayers that all will be well. And this is the largest crowd ever for a Jamestown Bar Association celebration of life, which bespeaks volumes as to our feelings toward your dad, Judge. So with that, we stand adjourned.